the Braver Angels podcast, a new way of talking politics. I'm your host, April Lawson, this episode, and I'm here with Mónica Guzmán, and we are introducing something really cool today. So, Moni, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm in a hotel room in Los Angeles, and the rare opportunity to have natural light on my face in these types of calls is welcomed. So, yeah, I'm also in the same city as you, which is fun.
I was going to say, yeah, my new city, LA, we've got lots of natural light. So,
yeah. Yep.
You should come
Copious
back.
amounts. Seattle,
yes.
Not so much. Right?
No. Yeah, well, I'm so happy to be here with you. And like this project that you've been working on, like I've been watching you pour your heart and soul into this thing. And it is so exciting to be able to like talk a little bit about it. And so I would love to know. So A Braver Way, right? That's this new podcast. Where did it come from? Like, what's the origin story? And I'd love to know both where did it like come from in terms of whatever the professional story might be, but also just in your life. Like, where does this come from in you?
Yeah. So when you ask me that question, what's coming up a lot is I've met a lot of people who are just all over the country, Braver Angels alliances or not. You know, they'll attend an event or a workshop or a conference or whatever it is in all kinds of different communities. And, you know, sometimes while I'm delivering a talk or whatever, I'll see their faces and I can tell there's a story there. And I'll try to find them afterward, or they'll come up to me and they'll say what's been going on with their families, or they'll ask me a really specific question about this particular issue in their lives that they don't know how to bridge or whatever it is. And I feel like every time I make that kind of contact with someone, there's like a tether that forms and they're kind of with me all along. And so after a year and a half since my book came out, but like 2 years being at Braver Angels on staff, but 3 years volunteering and doing this work, and even before then thinking about it, that's a lot of stories and a lot of questions, a lot of agony, a lot of pain, some hope, right? But they're all, I close my eyes and I see them as sort of a lot of them gather together and bundle up, right? There's different categories of questions. But for the most part, the biggest question, if I can sum it up in one word, the biggest question is how. How do we do this? Yes, it sounds like a great idea. Yes, I can see how it can save the world. Sure, I'd love to repair my relationship with so-and-so. Yes, I'd love to live, a life where I feel safe and at peace, despite all these rampant disagreements all around me. But how?
Yeah.
So that question's been screaming in my head and my heart for a long time. So, professionally, an opportunity kind of came up to work on a new project from within Braver Angels, and I realized we got to work on the how we do this, and we've got to work on it with the stories that are out there, bringing them out and bringing them up, and helping people see they're not alone, that these questions and concerns are universal, and that people are finding their own wisdom. You don't have to be an intellectual. You don't have to read a lot. You don't have to be a politics wonk at all. You just need to be a person. That's it. You've already come with the expertise you need. So, yeah. Anyway, so we can say more about that. But I feel really, really passionate that we need the how explored deeply and candidly, and wherever possible, fearlessly, because there's so much hunger.
I love that because it really, I mean, first of all, I relate to it. Like, that is the question is like, of course I'd love to live that way, but how, right? Like, show me the path. Like, I don't see it. Yeah. And I just love that. I suspect, knowing you, that has something to do, you said fearlessly, with the term A Braver Way. What is that about? And like, what is that? I know that you've put a lot of thought the beautiful thing about this podcast is that it just has your fingerprints all over it, and you're a person with sort of exacting quality standards. So I also know that you've put some thought into like,
It's a
which
nice
is
way to put
good.
it.
That's a compliment.
It can be good. It can be pretty terrible. But
It's
yeah.
yeah. Well, I what I mean is that I know that you've put some real thought into like, what's the mission? Like, how are we going to get there? Like, tell me about the title and the values, and like what you're really trying to do here.
Yeah, I mean, the title came from a phrase that I just find myself using and find others using. We need we need a better way to talk about politics. No, no, we need a braver way to talk about politics because it's not just the quality of something that improves, it's an acknowledgement that there's a certain kind of courage that is needed to do many of the things that this work takes. Looking inward and acknowledging where you might be wrong, listening openly so that you get past assumptions that you hold about people or beliefs. All of these things take courage. Engaging at all over an issue that feels very, very threatening. There may there are easier ways than what you imagine in almost all cases for practicing taking small steps, small steps. I can't tell you how often, that I run into that when I do this work out there with new people or kind of bringing these ideas out. The phrase that jumps to me from the past on this is, "You don't have to talk to a Nazi tomorrow." Really? Yes. No. No. And I think because there's fear, then people go to the worst case scenario and they'll imagine a future where they get hurt so badly, where they break a relationship, where everything gets even worse than it is now. They imagine the future where they're harming the world by allowing someone else to speak their truth, or they're harming the world by speaking their own truth all the way. All these possibilities come up, and so that's why it feels like we don't need a better way, we need a braver way. Because if we're not honest together, we're not together. And you know that better than anyone because you started our debates program, and that's the Brave Angels debates is where it's the context where I have seen the most truth come out most freely and most, safely, to use a term that can sometimes seem too blue, but at least most securely. Most people will hear it and they will be heard. And it's an extraordinary experience. And they'll do it across any issue. What? So anyway, so we know that these things are not only possible but doable and actually easier than we think. And so taking in the challenges, confronting those barriers, and being really honest about them is part of the mission of this podcast. But it is courage.
So I love that, and I'm just thinking, like, frankly, like, what if I'm scared? Like, what if, who is this for? Like, is this for people who, like, because I have to tell you, I work in this field and I still get, there are conversations that do not go well in my life. And like, and sometimes I'm just too angry or too something. And so who is this for? And what kind of person do I need to be to like learn from this?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. This is not for people who are already, it's not just for people who are already in. Like, sign me up, coach. Put me into any conversation. I can handle it. Yeah, let's go. Like, welcome. If you are, I mean, I'm kind of one of those people, if I'm honest. Sometimes I can be like all naive and bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. But no, the reality is far more complicated. And just like you, just because, whatever, I'm at Braver Angels and work with you, brilliant people like you and others who teach me so much, and all of these things, and I'm in this practice and this work every day. No, this is not something you just conquer and then coast. That's not how this works. So even if you feel like you happen to be one of those people who, I got this. It's like, no, there's a lot of stuff out there that none of us got. None of us have got. But even more importantly, that's not who this is for at all. This is for anyone who finds any tug in themselves to the idea of not giving up. Not giving up on the disagreements that seem impossible, not giving up on connecting with family members or friends who seem like there's no way that you'll be able to see each other, what you really think on these issues. Not giving up on your desire to change the world. There's a disagreement that you're like, something's got to give. But maybe you sense that staying in the shadows or lobbing metaphorical grenades on social media is not really going to do anything to change that world. All of those things, there's a lot of on-ramps to this. And I kind of map it to Braver Angels. I mean, when I go around and meet people who have joined alliances or attend events, you know, some of them are brand new. Some of them come because of pain. Some of them come because of hope. But they all come for their own reasons. So what I love about the podcast format is this is an intimate, personal format. And I think of speaking to like each person who's listening as if it were a one-to-one conversation. So, and sparking whatever comes up, whatever it is, then if you're curious about what that will be for you, you know, as we ask how, and we confront barriers, then check it out. Check it out and see what comes up, and see what new paths can open.
So I loved the image that you offered in the, like, at the very beginning of every time you talk to someone and they tell you a story, there's a little tether that's formed. I love that. It makes me think that, like, you are now walking through the world with these little pieces, a little crowd actually kind of coming with you. And I'm curious, like, how are those people, like, are those your guests? Like, how is this, how are those people shaping this, and how are you picking guests and topics? Is it like listening to those voices? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So the format of each episode, I'm really excited about. There's a main interview with someone. Then you and I check in with each other about the strategies that surfaced in that main interview and how they apply in our lives, or how the challenge applies in our lives, and also our take on what the blue side is good and bad at when it comes to those strategies, and what the red side is good and bad at. Okay. But then after that segment, there's what we call the community voice. This is where you hear for 4 to 5 straight minutes somebody tell their own story in their own words about some transformation that happened as a result of their crossing the political divide. I just listened back not long ago to the one that's going to appear on episode 3, and that one is a woman who was having such intense fights with her aging father, because she would walk in his house. She's liberal, he's conservative, and she would hear something on Fox News, and it would, and she would become irritable, and such intense fights. It had severe consequences for the relationship, and yet, there were some things she did, and things she tried, and things she learned that made it so that they not only repaired but really deepened their relationship and got so much closer than they'd ever been right before he passed. So there's stories like that. And I mean, I've got other people in mind. Episode 2, the main guest. So what we try to do when we look for guests is people who have demonstrated courage in crossing the divide in a way that can teach us all. They may not consider themselves teachers. They didn't write books necessarily. They didn't, they're not going around doing their thing. But because they've done it, of course we have something to learn. So one of the episodes is 2 Christian conservatives who one is black, one is white, and they're very close. And 10 years into their friendship, they discovered that the family of the white man owned as slaves the family of the black man. And you can imagine the journey they've taken there. So that's it. It's like these are this season's going to be 10 episodes, and we've got someone in the main guest slot who's demonstrated courage in crossing the divide, and then and then we talk about the strategies, and then we hear from someone who thematically, their story just kind of connects in one way or another. And then we close out with a song from the Braver Angel songwriting community. And yeah, it's some moving parts, but yeah, the idea is that each episode asks a very specific how question. So in the episode with the friends who are, Black and white and discovered this link in their families, the how question is, how do you bridge over a legacy of pain? Other questions include, how do you bridge the class divide? How did Abraham Lincoln do it? We venerate Lincoln for being sort of the icon in our history of bridging divides, and we have all these beautiful speeches. Man, they're great. But in his own life, how did he do it? Did he do it? Didn't he get mad? What did he think of people who disagreed with him on things like slavery? And so we talk with not Lincoln, but the next best thing, which is the leading scholar on Abraham Lincoln, has written 4 books about him and knows him about as well as anyone can know Abraham Lincoln in 2023. So all kinds of questions that help us get to something deeper. How do you bridge within a family? This is an episode where I interviewed my parents.
I was going to say, we've got to talk about the one about your family. Yes.
And they interviewed me. So that one, I'm going to be a little nervous. I'm going to be a little nervous on that one. But man, that one was pretty great. So we've got political leaders as well, because this is something that's very, very much on their doorstep, and media. So it's going to be
cool.
It's going to be a lot.
There's a lot of good stuff there. Wow. That's super helpful. And I also would just love to know, so I know that any podcast is, there's obviously the person who has the main mic, but it's a team effort. And I know that you're a team person like I am. And so, who's on your team? Who's behind the scenes? Like, tell us about them.
Right. You are, which is great.
Well,
that's really fantastic. I'm really grateful for our friendship, April. You are legit conservative. I'm legit liberal. And we have fun, man. We have fun talking about stuff. We're both here in Los Angeles, and just last night we were hanging out, and we had some really interesting, of exchanges. We watched the Republican debate together. So that's, I really, really love that, that you're someone.
That's a privilege.
Right. When I talk with you about these things, I'm so ready to hear your point of view, and it feels like you're so ready to hear mine.
Yeah.
And we don't share experiences, and there's a lot of opinions we absolutely contradict each other on. But I don't know. There's just something where I'm very sort of automatic now, like very ready to be really open with you. So
I'm smirking a little bit because, like, cool. Actually, it is cool. Even last night when we were walking my dog. Thank you again for letting me walk the dog.
Oh, June.
Yes, there were a couple things where I was like, oh man, I've got to ask her about that. I don't agree with that. I wonder what she thinks. Like, where does that come from? So I mean, I could not be more excited about this. And I feel like I'm learning things every time we talk, basically.
Yeah.
So
same.
Yeah.
I've actually, I don't think I've told you this, but after we do, our recordings where we comment on the strategies that came up in the main guest interview, I take out my notebook and I just start writing, because there's just more there. There's more there to pull out, and it gets so interesting. It's like we get a flywheel spinning, and you can keep going. You could keep going. So that's been really cool.
Well,
Plus, of course, you're remarkably brilliant when it comes to all of these things and creating the debate program. So I definitely admire everything you've learned, and that you're willing to share it in this way. So then we have our producer David Albright, who is. He is fantastic. He's a longtime journalist and storyteller, and videographer, and has been getting into the podcast format. So he helped take this from something that is sort of, we turn on the microphone and then we turn it off, and then that's the episode, into something that can have many segments and music underlying those segments, and something that kind of connects and carries you through. And like those podcasts that I've always been like, oh my god, it'd be great to have those podcasts someday, where you hear from one person, and then you're kind of pulled out of the narrative to think about something else, and then you're back in the narrative. We're doing that in some of these episodes, which I thought we couldn't do. So
Cool.
David Albright, is helping us make that happen.
Mm.
And I gotta call out to my friend Sarah Lerner, who really helped me see in the early days of this what this could really be. And I just
Mm.
didn't believe that it could be what it's
Mm-hmm.
becoming. And I thank her for that. And then and then Jessica Jones is a producer as
Mm-hmm.
well, and she has been extraordinary, just thought partner for me and helping me with so much of the work that we're doing and leading a lot of initiatives and projects that are growing out of what we do. And
This is
she's
the
a
woman who runs your
killer,
life, right?
pretty
Like
much. She's a
that you wouldn't
killer
survive
project
without.
manager. Yes, I'm starting to think like if we don't have Jessica, we
Mm-hmm.
can't.
Yes.
We can't. So she's phenomenal, and she's keeping the trains running. And then there's Gangsta Grass. So,
Yeah.
Gangsta Grass is this extraordinary band, bluegrass, hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
chart topping band. And
Mm-hmm.
they played at the Braver Angels convention. Then they went on a
Mm-hmm.
European tour, and we were talking to them about, oh my gosh, could could we do a thing where you're the theme music? What do you think?
Ooh. Uh-huh.
And so they are, and
Woohoo!
it's fantastic. So the music is really cool. They really carry that through. But it does feel like beyond all of this, it's a team effort in terms of the people who've agreed to share their really personal stories about
Mm-hmm.
how they've struggled with the political divide in their own lives. Really personal stories, April. I'm so grateful to each of them for bringing that to this
Mm-hmm.
project.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and the guests themselves, some of whom I was like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
really? You'll do this? Oh, great! Oh my gosh, great! Like, see you next week. Let's do it."
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a team effort in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. Also, Mike Casantini, our producer in
Mm-hmm.
LA, who is
Mm-hmm.
helping out. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
and can't can't not shout out Caitlin Ann, who
Yes.
made the graphic. So if
Mm-hmm.
you look at the A Braver Way graphic, it is a heart, but not like a pretty Valentine's Day card heart. It is the anatomical heart, the
Mm-hmm.
messy. It's not bloody, but we know that the actual organ itself is quite bloody. It's naturally
Mm-hmm.
red and blue,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, and the heart. The word courage.
Mm-hmm.
The root of the word courage is core, the Latin word core.
Oh.
So the heart is the seat of courage.
Mm-hmm.
So we really really identify with that. Sitting at the core of this project is the heart. So that's why we say that this is a show for how to disagree about politics without losing heart. And that's really in the middle of it is this. It's naturally red and blue, this heart, and the veins and the arteries, they sure do need each other. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a messy life that they sustain, and it's never going to be perfect, and sometimes things go wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
we do need each other. So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Well,
something
and
of the beat.
Mani, I love that. First of all, there's not a better metaphor for this. You forgot a very important team member, which is you.
Oh,
And
hi.
so, hi.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about you? And if I'm just going to warn you, if you don't do it well enough, I'm going to brag
Uh-oh.
for you
Okay.
because you do this self-deprecating thing. And anyway, yes, who are you? Tell us who you
Okay.
are.
All right. Well, okay. So okay.
I can
Hi,
go
Monica.
first if that's easier.
No. Let me try to sum it up.
Okay.
I am my name's Monica Guzmán. I am a liberal. I've been a journalist my whole career. I care deeply about helping people understand each other. And not too long ago, I felt like doing daily journalism wasn't enough because there's such a foundational brokenness at the base of our society. And our institutions, including media, aren't able to connect us the way that they should and could. So I decided to step out of that work and look underneath and look more broadly and take a bigger view. The big reason I was inspired to do that is because my parents are deeply conservative and we have disagreed about politics in a very heated way for a long time. And yet we've been able to learn a lot from each other. Like a lot. So I love them very dearly. And when I started to hear, you know, people that I love who are on my side speak about people who voted for Trump, and conservatives who voted for Trump in particular as just total vermin. It just something about that felt really wrong, and I related to the need to do that. I mean, we've all been there. We've all just thought, you know what, forget these people. So we've all thought that, and it just it pulled me into something that has taken me on some journeys. Led me to you, led me to Braver Angels, led me to the book that I wrote, which is called I Never Thought of It That Way, and is still just I'm on the road. I'm on the road listening and learning. There's no final answers to any of this. There's only things to offer. But I really feel like understanding each other is paramount. And I'm scared and I'm worried about what happens if we keep judging each other more while we engage each other less. That vicious cycle is going to lead us to projections and exaggerations and misperceptions that aren't even real. And we're going to hurt each other more and more over that. And that needs to stop.
That's very powerful. Thank you. And that is good enough. You answered adequately, so I won't redo it for you. Yes, good. So just to wrap up, I'd like to end on two things. One is a sort of deep note, and one is practical, and which is actually perfect because your podcast, or rather this podcast, is consistently both of those things. And so the deep note is, actually, let's go, I'm going to redo this. So I want to end with two notes, one practical and one deep, which is perfect because this podcast tries to hit both of those levels and integrate them well. So the practical question is, how do people tune in and subscribe? How do we spread the word? Like, how do we take this further? And then the deeper note I want to end on is, you thought deeply, I know, with your team about the values. And I'd just like to hear you talk about them, like list them and talk about them, because I think that they speak volumes about like who you are, what this is. And yeah, so if you could sort of speak to those two things, that would be great.
Yeah. So the way to find us is we're called A Braver Way on all the podcasting platforms and Apple and Spotify and all those things. You can go to braverangels.org/A Braver Way, and you'll find us there as well. We're on social media at A Braver Way. So yeah, hopefully that's easy enough to get to. And please do subscribe and ring that bell on YouTube. I think you have to ring a bell. I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, to be notified when episodes drop. The podcast values, we did think really deeply about them. There are a few of them. So the podcast is redemptive. So it aims to be empowering, useful, and supportive. So we equip people to be braver neighbors, relatives, citizens, and humans. It's curious, of course. I'm big on curiosity. So it's open, it's humble, it tries to be perceptive. We turn assumptions into questions and go down rabbit holes at will. So you can tell that I'm reading from a document that got a lot of thought put into it. It tries to be fearless. These are all we try to be, okay? Like this is what we're aiming for. We'll hit or miss the mark sometimes, but we're aiming. So it tries to be fearless, candid and bold, bringing up the tough stuff and making it worthwhile. Personal. This is really important. If I don't want to be formal. I don't want to seem aloof. Relatable. We seek out and share the stories that help us make sense to each other. You and I have talked a lot about how important experiences are, and sometimes how persuasive too, to understanding and to persuasion. Creative. We want to be intuitive. We want to keep flexing and just not be done trying new things. So even though I talked about the format of this podcast, there's several episodes where we'll break the rules a little bit just to try something out. And this one is probably the hardest because it's new and I'm still understanding what it means. And you and I have talked about it a lot. Multilingual. So the podcast aims to be multilingual. So it's approachable, understanding, and aware. So the way we describe this is we strive to learn and welcome the many languages of American perspectives. Many languages. This in some ways I think will be the most challenging thing of all for us to pull off, but for listeners to sit with. You'll hear you may hear some languages that are not native to the way you look at the world, and you may hear terminology from guests who disagree with you that, I don't know, that feel weird, off, or who knows. But we believe that instead of trying to get everyone to, no, like, don't say this or that or the other thing, that we need to speak fully, freely, and when without fear. And so we're going to practice that together by listening fully, freely, and without fear to people speak in the native language of their own meaning. And that can be very challenging to do in such a divided time, but we invite everyone to do that with us. It's challenging for me, too. It's been a real journey. So, yeah, those are the values.
Well, that is unbelievable. I mean, just for my part, I think I hope I've said this, but this project is one of the most meaningful things in my world right now. And I think that it's because of those values. And I think that it will be meaningful for all y'all who are listening too. Like, I think that this can really do something in your life and in you and your relationships. And so I just want to thank you, Moni, for putting so much into this, and the whole team. And so everybody get excited, and should be great. So
yep, and wish us luck. Go. There's still a lot of work to do before launch, so there's some serious hustle. Every plane flight, I'm doing like 10 things on this podcast, but we're gonna get it as good as it can be for launch, and we're really excited.
Yeah. And so people can expect to receive it on what day?
Yeah, I always hesitate to give a launch date because what if we have to push back? But, if we have to edit this out, we'll edit it out. But the launch date is October 24th, and we'll be dropping 3 episodes that day. And then there will be a new episode every other week until we've gone through the 10.
Okay. Well, we'll count down. The
countdown begins.
That's right. Thank you, Moni. Thanks for this.
Thank you, April.
Yay.
All right.